3 years after my husband passed, the phone rang on a gray October morning, and a man I'd never spoken to said, "Mrs. Mercer, I'm holding a sealed letter your husband left with this firm. I need you to come down to my office, and I need you to come down to my office, and I need you to come alone. Please don't tell anyone in the family yet. It's Diana, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. Settle in, get yourself a cup of coffee, and stay with me to the end of this one, because I still can hardly believe it happened to me. And if you would, leave a like, and tell me down in the comments which town you're listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. For 41 years, I thought I knew everything there was to know about my husband, Henry. We were married the June after I turned 20, in a little Methodist church outside Dayton, Ohio, with my mother's pearls around my neck, and my father crying in the front pew. Henry ran the hardware store on Main Street that his own father had run before him. He could fix anything, and he never raised his voice, not once in all those years. He balanced our checkbook to the penny at the kitchen table every Sunday night with the radio on low. He coached our son's little league team for 11 seasons. That was Henry. Steady, quiet, the kind of man who'd be ashamed if anyone made a fuss over him. When he died 2.5 years ago, it was a stroke in his sleep. He went the way he lived, without complaint, without warning, on an ordinary Tuesday. I woke up next to a man who wasn't there anymore. I grieved him the way you grieve a person you shared one bed with for 4 decades, slowly, in pieces. I'd reach for him in the night for months. But I had my faith, and I had my children, and I built myself a small, quiet life out of what was left. Our son Dale lived 2 hours away in Columbus with his wife Brenda. Our daughter Bonnie was all the way out in Portland with her husband and my grandbabies. After the funeral, after the casserole stopped coming and the cards slowed to a trickle, life found its rhythm again. The house was paid off. I had Henry's pension from when the store was incorporated, and Social Security, and the life insurance had let me breathe easy. I volunteered at the food pantry on Wednesdays. I played euchre with the girls on Friday nights. I called Bonnie every Sunday and watched my grandchildren grow up 2,000 miles away through a phone screen. It wasn't a fancy life, but it was mine, and it was peaceful. And after 41 years of standing behind a man, I was finally learning to stand on my own 2 feet. And then that phone rang while I was watering the geraniums on the back porch. "My name is Mr. Okafor," the voice said. "Daniel Okafor. I'm an attorney here in town. I apologize for calling out of the blue like this. Your husband's affairs were handled before my time by a colleague who has since retired. We've been going through his old files, and we found something. A letter, sealed with your name on it, in your husband's own hand." I set the watering can down on the rail so I wouldn't drop it. "A letter," I said, "after all this time." "Mrs. Mercer, I can't get into it over the phone. But I'll be honest with you. This is time sensitive, and there are complications. I'd ask that you not mention this to your children just yet. Not until you've read it. Can you come in tomorrow morning, say 9 o'clock? And please, come by yourself." I stood there a long moment after he hung up, the dial tone humming in my ear, the geraniums dripping onto the porch boards. Why on earth would Henry leave a letter with a lawyer? Henry, who told me everything, who couldn't keep a secret to save his life, who'd ruined every surprise birthday party I ever tried to throw him. What complications, and why wasn't I supposed to tell Dale or Bonnie? I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my side of the bed. It had been my whole bed for almost 3 years, and I still slept on my half, and I went through every possibility. Had Henry been in some kind of trouble I never knew about? Debt? Another woman? I almost laughed at that one. The man wore the same brown cardigan for 15 winters. But the not knowing crawled under my skin and stayed there until the sky went pale. The next morning, I put on the navy dress I'd worn to his funeral. I don't know why. It just felt like the right armor. I was buttoning my coat when Bonnie called from Portland. "Morning, Mom. You sound funny. Everything okay?" "I've just got a doctor's appointment," I said. "Routine. Nothing to worry about." The lie sat in my mouth like a stone. I've never been good at lying to my children. But Mr. Okafor's voice was in my head. "Don't tell anyone in the family yet. And so I lied to my own daughter and hated myself for it the whole drive into town. His office is upstairs from the old bank building on the square, a narrow room with a big window that looked out over the courthouse lawn. He was younger than I expected, maybe 40, in a gray suit, and he stood up the second I came in and shook my hand with both of his. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Mercer. Please, sit. Can I get you some water?" "Just tell me what this is about," I said. I didn't sleep a wink. He nodded like he understood, and he reached into a folder and slid an envelope across the desk to me. The paper had gone a little yellow at the edges, and there, in Henry's handwriting, that cramped, careful hand he'd had at the end, when the arthritis was bad and it took him twice as long to sign a check, was my name. For Diana. To be opened only if it ever comes to a fight. "What fight?" I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. Mr. Okafor folded his hands on the desk. "Mrs. Mercer, before you open that, there's something you need to know. 11 days ago, your son Dale and his wife filed a lawsuit. They're contesting your husband's will. They're claiming you exercised undue influence over him in his final years, that you isolated him, that you pressured him, and that you've hidden assets from the estate. They're asking the court to throw out the will and redistribute everything." I heard the words. I just couldn't make them fit together into anything that made sense. "Dale," I said. "My Dale." "I'm afraid so. He's the named plaintiff, along with his wife." He paused and his voice got gentle. "And according to the letter you're holding, your husband knew this might happen. He left instructions that it only be opened in exactly this circumstance." My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't get my thumb under the flap. He took it back, slid it open with a little brass knife, and handed it to me. I unfolded 2 pages covered front and back in Henry's tired handwriting, dated a little over a year before he died, and I read the last thing my husband ever said to me. "My Diana, if you're reading this, then the thing I prayed wouldn't happen has happened, and I'm so sorry I'm not there to stand beside you. I should have warned you while I was alive, but I kept hoping I was wrong about our boy. You know how I am. I always wanted to think the best of people, especially of him. But I've watched it happening for a while now. Brenda has gotten her hooks into Dale, and she's drowning Diana. The 2 of them are in debt up to their necks. The boats, the trucks, that house they can't afford. She's been turning him against us a little at a time, the way you boil a frog so it doesn't notice. I've sat at our own dinner table and heard her plant the seeds, and I've watched my son swallow them. There are 2 things you need to know. The first is the life insurance, $400,000, and it's yours, all of it, no question. The beneficiary is you, and only you. The second is the one they don't know about. When my father's farmland out in the next county sold, I didn't put that money in our joint account. I set up a trust, $850,000, and it's protected, and it's yours, and Dan Okafor at the firm has the papers. I did it quietly because I knew if Dale ever found out the size of it, Brenda would never let it rest. Diana, they are going to come after you. They're going to say I was confused, that you took advantage of me. It's a lie, and you know it's a lie, and Dan can prove it's a lie. Don't you dare give them 1 red cent more than the will says. I left each of the kids $40,000, which is $40,000 more than the way Dale's been acting deserves. Fight them, my love. You were always the strong one. You just never had to prove it because I was standing in front of you. Now I can't. So show them. I love you. I'm sorry I left you to do this alone. Yours, every day of forever. Henry. I read it 3 times. Each time it got harder to breathe. My son. The little boy I'd nursed through the chicken pox and the broken arm and the broken heart over a girl in 10th grade. The young man whose college I'd helped pay for, whose wedding I planned half of myself because Brenda's mother couldn't be bothered. He was doing this to me. How much are they asking for? I finally managed. Mr. Okafor checked his notes. They're arguing that under the circumstances, you should receive only the minimum elective share, roughly a third, and that the remaining 2/3 should be split between the 2 children. They're also claiming the life insurance should be divided equally, not paid solely to you. If they were to win, Mrs. Mercer, the house would likely have to be sold to satisfy the division. You'd be left with somewhere around $180,000. In this market that doesn't buy you another house in this town, it barely buys you a 1-bedroom condo. And the trust? That's the piece they don't know about. As long as it stays that way, it's protected, and it's leverage. But Mrs. Mercer, I need you to understand what you're walking into. Your daughter-in-law has hired Frank Castellano. He's the most aggressive estate litigator in 3 counties. They're going to claim elder abuse. They're going to put it in writing that you cut your husband off from his own son. They are going to stand up in front of a judge and call you a gold digger who manipulated a sick old man. He leaned forward. This is going to get ugly. I won't pretend otherwise. I looked out his window at the courthouse across the lawn, at the maples turning red and gold, at a young mother pushing a stroller down the sidewalk like the world was a perfectly ordinary place, and something hardened in me. I felt it happen. For 41 years, Henry had stood in front of me, and I'd let him, and I'd told myself I was the soft one. But Henry was the one who taught our kids, you don't ever back down from a bully. He believed it. He wrote it on his deathbed in a shaky hand. And he trusted me to do it. Let them call me whatever they want, I said. I know who I am. Henry knew who I was. What do we do first? We did everything. Over the next 2 weeks, I turned my dining room table into a war room. I dug out 41 years of our life. Bank statements, the deed, photographs of every anniversary, the cards Henry wrote me, his medical records that showed he was sharp as a tack, right up until the stroke, the receipts from the cruise we'd taken the year before he died. Mr. Tide. Okafor filed a motion to dismiss, arguing the will had already gone through probate clean almost 3 years back, and then he did the thing that won us the war. He subpoenaed every text message and email between my son and his wife going back 4 years. If they've been planning this, he said, it'll be in writing somewhere. It always is. I didn't tell Bonnie any of it. Not at first. I couldn't bear to put it on her, all the way out in Oregon with 2 little ones and a third on the way, but it came out the way these things always do. One Thursday afternoon, I was sorting documents when she called me, and I could hear the tears in her voice before she said a word. Mom, Dale called me. He's saying you're hiding Dad's money. He says you've got some shark lawyer and you're trying to cut us all out. What is going on? I sat down. Honey, I said, sit down. There's a lot you don't know, and none of it is what your brother is telling you. I told her everything. The lawsuit. The letter. What her father had seen at his own dinner table. I read her Henry's letter over the phone, and by the time I got to Fightdom, my love, my daughter was sobbing. He knew, she said. Dad knew Dale would do this. He hoped he was wrong. So did I. There was a long silence, and then my Bonnie said in a voice I'd never heard from her before, steady and cold and absolutely certain, What do you need me to do, Mom? I'll fly out. I'll testify. I'll do whatever it takes. He is not going to take Daddy's house from you. That's when I knew, whatever happened in that courthouse, I'd already won something that mattered. But it got worse before it got better. The Monday after that, Mr. Okafor called me at 7 in the morning. They filed an affidavit, he said. Someone claiming to be a longtime family friend, swearing she personally heard you and Henry discussing how to hide money from the kids before he died. They're using it to ask the court to freeze your accounts. That's a lie, I said. Who would say that? The name on it is Gail Hartwell. I sat down hard on the kitchen chair. Gail Hartwell was Brenda's mother. A woman who disliked me from the rehearsal dinner, who thought her daughter had married down, who hadn't set foot in my house in years and hadn't even come to Henry's funeral. She's my daughter-in-law's mother, I said. She wasn't a friend of ours. She didn't know Henry. She's lying under oath. There was a pause on the line, and when Mr. Okafor spoke again, there was something almost like satisfaction in his voice. Mrs. Mercer, he said, they just made a serious mistake. A false affidavit is perjury. We can prove she had no relationship with your husband. They thought you'd be too frightened to fight back, so they overreached. Now they've handed us the rope. He let that sit. Are you ready to use it? I thought of Henry's handwriting. You were always the strong one. Yes, I said. Use it. He worked fast. He filed a counter-motion exposing the false affidavit. He filed for a protective order keeping my son and his wife from contacting me directly and from spreading lies to the rest of the family. And then those subpoenaed messages came back, and we sat at my dining room table reading my son's own words and I had to get up twice to be sick. They had been planning it for 2 years. There were texts where Brenda asked Dale, while Henry was still alive, whether the old man had updated anything. There was a message where she wrote that once he's gone, she'll cave, she's soft, she'll just want it over with. There was a whole thread about which lawyer to hire and how much they could realistically squeeze. My son had written back, as long as Mom doesn't mow up. This is easy money. He'd called it easy money. About his mother. About the woman who'd held his hand through pneumonia. I sat in my kitchen that night, and I cried until I had nothing left, and then I dried my face and I did not cry about it again. They knew we were closing in, because that's when they showed up at my door. It was a Saturday, and I was raking leaves when a big black truck I didn't recognize pulled into my driveway. Dale got out. Behind him came Brenda. In heels she could barely walk across my gravel in, looking around my yard like she was appraising it. "Mom, we need to talk," Dale called. I held on to my rake. Not as a weapon, just to have something steady in my hands. "I have nothing to say to you." "Now we're family," Brenda said, with that sugar syrup voice she used. "Surely we can be reasonable." I walked toward them slowly. "You filed a lawsuit accusing me of abusing my own husband," I said. "You got your mother to lie under oath. You tried to freeze the accounts I live on, and now you want to be reasonable." At least Dale had the decency to look at his shoes. "Mom, if you'd just be fair about splitting Dad's." "Your father split it exactly the way he wanted?" I cut him off. "It was all legal. It was all fair. He left each of you $40,000, which was generous considering." Brenna's mask slipped then, just for a second, and I saw what was underneath. "We know about the trust," she said. My stomach dropped. Dale looked at her like he didn't know that part either. "You think we don't have people who can find these things?" she went on. $850,000, just sitting there. That's marital property. That belongs to the family." She took a step toward me on my own driveway. "Split that trust 2 ways, and we'll drop the whole thing. You keep the house, everybody walks away happy." "Everybody except me," I said. I looked at my son. "Dale, your father wrote me a letter before he died. Do you want to know what he said about you?" "Don't," Dale said. His voice cracked. "Don't, Mom." "You have until Friday," Brenda said, grabbing his arm, "where we add Gail's affidavit and 3 more, and we bring in a forensic accountant, and we drag every dollar you and Henry ever spent through that courtroom. You won't have anything left when we're done." "Get off my property," I said. Each word came out like a chip of ice. They left, but Brenda turned around at the truck and called back. "You can't win this, Diana. We've got the resources. How long can you afford to fight an old woman like you?" I stood in my driveway shaking for a full 10 minutes after the truck was gone. Then I went inside, locked every door, and called my lawyer, and I told him about the trust being exposed and the threats. "Good," Mr. Okafor said. "Good. Ah, they came to your house to intimidate you into settling, Mrs. Mercer. People don't do that when they're winning. They do it when they're scared. It means our subpoena landed. Don't talk to them. Don't respond to anything. Let me do the rest." The trial was set for a cold morning in January. There was snow on the courthouse steps, and Bonnie flew in 3 days early and held my hand the whole way up them. Her brother wouldn't look at either of us. I won't drag you through every hour of it, but I'll tell you the part I'll remember until the day I die. Mr. Castellano stood up and painted me as a manipulative old woman who'd isolated a sick man from his loving son. He put Gail Hartwell on the stand, and she swore again that she'd heard Henry and me scheming. And then Mr. Okafor stood up, calm as a Sunday, and he asked her 3 simple questions. When had she last been inside my home? She couldn't say. Had she attended Henry's funeral? She had not. Could she produce a single photograph, card, or message from 20 years of this supposed close friendship? She could not. Then he entered into evidence the visitor logs from Henry's last hospital stay, where her name appeared exactly nowhere, and you could feel the whole room turn. And then he read the texts. My son's own words, in open court. She's soft. She'll cave. Easy money. The planning. The 2 years of it started while their father was still breathing. I watched Dale put his face in his hands. I watched Brenda go white. And then Mr. Dom Okafor read Henry's letter, the whole thing, in that quiet courtroom, my husband's voice reaching out from 2.5 years in the ground to defend me, one last time. By the end of it, half the gallery was crying. Bonnie was crying. The court reporter had stopped typing. The judge, her name was Judge Alvarez, and she'd been on that bench, she told us, for 26 years, took off her glasses and looked down at my son and his wife for a long, long time. In 26 years, she finally said, I have seen a great many families ruined by grief, but it is rare, even for me, to see something this calculated. These messages show a plan that began while the deceased was still alive. That is not grief, that is greed, and it is malice, and this court will not reward it. She found that Henry's will was valid, that he'd been of completely sound mind, and that there was not one shred of evidence I'd done anything but love my husband for 41 years. She dismissed the lawsuit entirely. And then she said the words I'll never forget. Furthermore, this court finds that this action was filed in bad faith. I am sanctioning the plaintiffs and their counsel for frivolous litigation in the amount of $60,000 payable to Mrs. Mercer to offset her legal costs. Brenda made a strangled little sound, and the affidavit submitted by Gail Hartwell appears to this court to constitute perjury. I am referring the matter to the county prosecutor's office for criminal investigation. She turned to my son. Young man, your father left you $40,000. You've now spent close to that fighting a lawsuit you knew was a lie. You owe $60,000 more in sanctions, and you've lost your mother and your sister. I hope it was worth it. Dale said nothing. He couldn't even lift his head. Outside the courtroom in the marble hallway, he caught up to me. His eyes were red. Mom, I'm sorry. I never meant. You meant exactly what those messages said you meant, I told him. You called me easy money, Dale. You chose her debts over your father's memory. You chose to believe a lie over 41 years of the truth. Those were your choices. Now you live with them. I can fix this. I can make it right. No, I said. Some things, once you break them, stay broken. And I took my daughter's arm and I walked away from my son, and I felt my heart break, and my chest fill with something like air at the very same time. I won't pretend the months after were all sweetness, but I'll tell you, there was a kind of justice in them that I didn't have to lift a finger for. Brenda's mother took a plea on the perjury, 18 months suspended, and a record that follows her now. When Dale and Brenda couldn't come up with the $60,000 inside 90 days, the court garnished his wages, 25% of every paycheck, and he'll be paying me back for years. Their marriage didn't survive it. I heard through Bonnie that Brenda left him when she understood there was no money coming, which tells you everything you ever needed to know about that woman. Last I heard, she'd moved 2 states over, and Dale was renting a room above a garage. I took no joy in it. I'm his mother. Some part of me will grieve him until I die. But I won't pretend I didn't feel the rightness of it either. As for me, I sold the house. Too many ghosts, good and bad. And I bought a bright little place in a 55 and over community out by the reservoir, with a sunroom that catches the morning light. I bought it myself with my own money, and I picked every paint color. Bonnie says she's never seen me happier. And she's right. With Henry's insurance and the trust safe, I help with the grandchildren's college funds. I give to the food pantry I used to only volunteer at. And last spring, I took a watercolor class and made friends with a kind, funny widower named Russell from the garden club. We've gone to dinner a few times. At my age, imagine that. In April, my Bonnie had her baby, a little girl. They named her Diana, after me, and when Bonnie called to tell me, she said, "We wanted her to have the name of the strongest woman we know." I had to put the phone down for a minute. I'm not ashamed to say it. That night I read Henry's letter one more time, the way I do sometimes, and I got to the part where he wrote, "Fight them, my love." And I realized I finally understood what he'd known all along, that I had it in me the whole time, that I'd just never had to use it because he'd loved me enough to stand in front of me for 41 years. Well, I'd stood on my own now. I'd fought, and I'd won. Not just the case, but my whole life back. So I'll leave you with the question I keep asking myself. If you'd been standing in my driveway that Saturday with your own child telling you to just be reasonable, just split it, just make it all go away, would you have caved, or would you have stood your ground? I know what I'd tell you to do. Trust the voice inside that says no. Fight for what's yours. And don't you ever let anybody, not even your own flesh and blood, shame you into handing over the life you earned. For a long time after that courtroom, I kept asking myself how a boy I raised could call his own mother easy money. I've turned it over 1,000 ways, and what I keep coming back to is that none of it happened all at once. Dale didn't wake up one morning a different man. It was a slow thing, a debt here, a resentment there, a wife whispering at his ear until the whispering became his own voice. That's how I understand it now. Every choice he made fed the next one, the way a small lie needs a bigger lie to hold it up, until he was standing in my driveway in heels in a truck and couldn't even look me in the eye. Brenda chose greed, and greed ate her marriage. Gail chose to lie under oath, and the lie put a record on her name. None of that was bad luck. They planted those rows themselves, and the harvest came in exactly as planted. And Henry chose, even while he was dying, to do the quiet, unglamorous thing. He didn't make a speech. He didn't confront anybody. He just sat down with his bad hands and a sheet of paper and built me a wall I couldn't see until I needed it. That's the kind of goodness that doesn't show off. It just protects the people it loves. What I want you to take from my story isn't really about money at all. It's that being a decent person is not the same as being a soft one. I spent 41 years thinking I was the gentle one because Henry stood in front of me, and the truth was, I had steel in me the whole time. I just had to be cornered before I'd use it. When that lawyer slid me that letter, I had a choice. I could keep being the woman everyone assumed would cave, or I could become the woman my husband knew I already was. So here's what I tell you, whoever you are, listening from wherever you are, hold tight to your honesty, because in the end, it was the truth, plain and provable, that won my case. Not a clever trick. Use your head before you use your heart in a fight like this. The way I learned to gather every receipt and let my lawyer set the trap, instead of screaming on my own front lawn. And when your knees are shaking and somebody you love is telling you to just be reasonable, just let it go. Find the backbone to say no anyway. Goodness gives you the right to stand your ground. Clear thinking shows you how, but it's plain stubborn endurance that gets you up the courthouse steps in the snow. I lost my son. I won't pretend that wound ever fully closes. But I kept my home, my dignity, and the last promise my husband ever made me. And on the morning my granddaughter was born, and they gave her my name, I understood that the strongest thing a person can pass down isn't a house or a trust. It's the example of a woman who would not be moved,